Man runs away from his own funeral. What was found in his coffin was more than shocking. Carlos is a happily married taxi driver with 5 children he cherishes a lot. His wife, Maria, worked as a maid in a hotel. One job was never enough to sustain a family of 7, and so both had to work hard to make sure their children had a decent life. They lead a simple and happy life. Their household was safe and peaceful, and they were able to live comfortably and provide for their children's needs. However, with the inflation and the increased living costs, Carlos couldn't help but notice that his family's expenses had increased and that they needed a considerable amount of money for schools, university tuition, and life expenses. As someone who cares deeply about his family, he felt impoverished and helpless. He didn't have the money to meet all of his family's needs, and he didn't know what to do. Suffocated, he took his taxi and drove. He had no idea that his life was going to change forever that night. Carlos isn't a very talkative person and doesn't usually talk to his passengers, but that night in particular, he had a very long conversation with one of his passengers. The man he picked up talked quite a lot and surprisingly sparked a conversation with Carlos. He wanted to know more about him, if he had a family or children, how his life was like, the typical small talk you have with a stranger. Carlos was very surprised, but his heavy heart surely needed to pour a little. He told the man that he was married with 5 children, and even shared his financial worries. My children need money for their studies on the one hand, and on the other hand, I need to pay off my debts. I don't know what to do in this cruel world. The money I earn is not enough for anything, he confessed to the passenger. And what he said next was even bleaker. Life has become too harsh for someone like me. I'm even contemplating suicide. I don't know what to do. Carlos was at the verge of breaking down, and the passenger saw that. His answer was short and simple. I have a solution for you, but you must listen to me. Carlos was open to anything at that point. He was willing to hear whatever proposition the man had to say. You will be my right-hand man who helps me in my work. I have a very good job for you, one that will allow you to have a lot of money. Carlos was in awe, and he was very thankful for the man. But that wasn't the end of it. Carlos was shocked when he learned more about the job details. The man he had in his backseat was a drug dealer. He said that he helped people like Carlos. All he needed to do was distribute the merchandise, and he'd be paid greatly when he got the job done. Carlos was speechless and just remained silent after what he just had to hear. Mark, the passenger, knew Carlos' weaknesses and focused on them. He knew Carlos would crack at some point, and so he carried on saying, if you agree to work with me, your life will be completely transformed. You'll have an account in the bank. You'll be able to fulfill all the desires of your children. You'll be able to pay all your debts. He even told him that he'd been rich in no time, and he'd be able to not only provide for his family, but even lead a luxurious life. When Carlos found out how much he could earn, his eyes lit up with joy. However, he was still about the matter. After some thought, he ended up telling Mark that he was willing to work for him, but only for 1 month, just enough to pay his debts and get his life back on track. Mark accepted his deal and gave him his home address to get the business going. He asked Carlos to pay him a visit in the morning to get started. Carlos woke up earlier than usual, sparking some doubts in his wife, as this was very unusual of him. When she asked, he simply told her that he was getting to work, and that he had to do so early to make sure he got the early riders. He headed to Mark and got the training he needed to be initiated to the drug-dealing business. Mark had 3 main tips for Carlos, one he had to follow to the letter. First, you must focus carefully on what you are going to do because it is dangerous. Second, you must listen carefully to whatever I say to you. Third, and finally, I will give you a lot of money after you have done all the tasks that I will ask of you. After Mark finished explaining everything to Carlos, he gave him the product that he would distribute to people. Carlos was very scared at first, but Mark made it clear to him that he would be safe if he listened to his instructions. Carlos went to the address Mark gave him and delivered the goods he was asked to. The person he delivered to gave him a bag full of money. After his first task was completed, Carlos returned to Mark carrying the bag with the money. Mark took the briefcase, opened it, and smiled in pride. He gave Carlos a good pack of dollar bills and congratulated him on implementing the first step. Carlos was very happy that he got a considerable amount of money so soon. He was finally going to be able to buy everything his children needed and pay his debts in full. The next day, which was Christmas Day, Carlos decided to get the most extraordinary gifts for his children. He bought them too many clothes and gifts. While his kids were ecstatic and radiating with joy at the sight of all the gifts, his wife was concerned and asked him about where he got the money for all of that. His face turned red, and for the first time in his life, he had to lie to his wife. "I had a very good month and the clients were very generous with me and they gave me a lot of money. Plus, I get up early in the morning and work early," he answered without blinking. Even though his wife didn't believe him, she didn't know what to do about it. The next day, Carlos went to Mark again for his second task. Once again, he got the job done and returned to Mark to ask him for his share of money for that day. This time, however, things were different. Mark dropped a bomb on him. "I first gave you money just to lure you into doing 2 plans. I filmed you doing that. I have a video of you delivering drugs to that person. If you don't listen to my instructions, I will go to the police and give them that video. You'll be imprisoned immediately." Carlos' blood froze in his veins. He was in shock of what happened. In the heat and rage of the moment, he grabbed a knife from Mark's kitchen and stabbed him in the heart. Carlos had just killed a man, a crime he never thought he'd ever commit, and one he was stuck with now. After thinking about what he could possibly do to salvage himself, he finally found it. He'd fake his own death just to get away from his crime. Carlos got into a car crash. The police came and took his body. Carlos agreed with the doctor that he would tell them that he was found with no signs of life. The police came to the door of the family apartment and informed Maria that her husband had left the world. Shocked and unable to process the news, his family's funeral was very bleak and devastating. After they buried him and left, Carlos found a way to move out of the coffin and ran away. Not long after the burial, some strangers would come to the family house at odd hours and ask about Carlos and what he was doing. Maria would laugh at the question, especially when they hinted that he might have been in the drug business. She told them that if her husband had really worked in the business, they should have been rich. But how is that true? They were 8 people living in a small apartment with only 2 rooms. One night, Maria heard a knock on the door. When she went to see who it was, she only found a large bag with lots of money inside and a handwritten note. "I'm sorry for everything. I hope this helps a little." Maria burst in tears and felt her heart break once again. She had no idea what her husband got himself into. And things got worse. When she went with her children to check the coffin, they found it empty. And only a few steps away was Carlos' body as he took his own life after he got them the money. It was a sad day for his family, one he could have avoided had he listened to his mind rather than impulses.